Yep, you read that right, fellas. Size does matter, and sometimes smaller is better. And I am sure the few women watching this might agree that sometimes a smaller package is a bit better. Hey guys, interruption from future me here, but apparently I was nominated for Breakout Creator of the Year from the Gundies, so I would really appreciate it if you guys would go ahead and give me a vote over there. I'll have the link somewhere around. Maisie would appreciate it too. Thank you. I'm Jessie, and a little bit back I did a video, Size Does Matter, talking about the importance of the availability of SBRs for people of all different body frames, you name it, whatever, and how full-size rifles might not meet the needs of different people's statures, health concerns, any number of things. But in that video, I kind of very briefly touched on Bullpups, and a lot of you were absolutely correct in reminding me in the comments of how they could be a good option to get around SBR tax stamps and complications that go along with them, but still get that compact size. So for today's video, I did want to touch on some of the benefits and drawbacks of going on the Bullpup route. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, check out my Instagram, and let's get started. To help talk about Bullpups, I do have a Kel-Tec RDB here with me today. I'm going to do a video on just this specifically, so if you're interested on my take as this as a rifle, stay tuned for that. But otherwise, I'm just going to kind of talk about it in terms of general Bullpups. Admittedly, this is the first one that I have actually tried. I've shouldered and held a Tavor and an AUG, but I've never actually had real usage. So my experience with Bullpups is definitely not as robust as I potentially would like it to be. But right off the bat, you can see here that this Kel-Tec is smaller than the BCM that I have right above it. You've seen this one in a bunch of my other videos. It is honestly almost a magic trick when you realize that the Bullpup here has a longer barrel. The BCM's coming in at a 16-inch barrel, whereas the Kel-Tec RDB is gonna have a 17.3-inch barrel. But look at these side by side, buttstock to buttstock. It's evident that even with the Canon, the RDB is a much more compact size. Bullpups typically find themselves in the range of like a 10.3 SBR. You can see comparing here that the Stribog with an 8-inch barrel is pretty similar in size, just marginally smaller than the RDB is. And this one has a YHM R9 suppressor on it, which is going to be a little bit shorter to begin with, which helps obviously with some of those length differences. But you get the added benefit of a full-sized barrel with a Bullpup with the benefits of a compact size. So to anyone who's worried about downsizing on their AR platform and losing the performance benefits of shortening that barrel length, Bullpups are a fantastic workaround to that concern. Another benefit of Bullpups is in regards to their weight distribution. Obviously, compared to a full-size standard rifle here, you can expect it to be better, but even compared to something similar to this pistol size, SBRs kind of usually have a leg up still. The BCM here is bare bones because I can't afford to fully kit out all of my weapons. All of the nice little things on here went to the RDB, but even with that, you can still see that with nothing on it, the weight distribution. What you doing? Oh my goodness. So even without anything on this, you can see the weight distribution is kind of right here before the mag well. I mean, it's a little on, but I can't balance. But the RDB here, even with everything thrown on, the weight is still largely in the trigger group. So without attachments, you can typically find the weight distribution to be centered a little bit above the grip here. So it's only just slightly pushed forward with all of this stuff thrown on top. So side by side comparing on the BCM, it's largely about in the same area, but it's in the same area compared to something that's kitted out versus something that's already extremely lightweight and stripped bare bones. So right off the bat, you can see the huge benefit of having the weight largely centered back. For Bullpups, since they do tend to be rear heavy, when you start putting things on top, when you start putting all of your attachments on, it winds up balancing out the weight. So instead of being back heavy, it winds up becoming more stable. Whereas something like the Strybog here, the weight without anything is already centered more forward. And then when you start adding stuff on, obviously the weight in the front, of course, tips down. So you wind up having the comparison of something like the RDB that's going to become normalized with weight distribution when you start making additions, compared to the Strybog that's going to start becoming front heavy. All of the other pros and cons at this point are going to be much more subjective between individual shooters and individual weapon systems. I, for one, am extremely sensitive to gas coming back in my eyes. So you throw a can on a shorter barrel, something that's shooting 5.56, and I'm really not happy about it. You shoot a shorter rifle, all of that gas is trapped inside, shorter barrel, so when the action opens up and all of that gas rushes back to you, less distance to travel, meaning much more concentration coming back to your face all at once, and there is no getting around it. Obviously, some cans are going to be better at gas mitigation than others. Some rifles are going to be better than others, but as a general statement, I struggle with suppressed SBRs. Something like the RDB, though, on the other hand, that one actually has a big benefit specifically because it's downward ejecting. Something like an AUG that's still side ejecting might be just as bad as a regular SBR. But for me, the RDB, since it's pushing all of that gas downward, shooting that suppressed was easy. I did not feel any of that gas even after extended shooting bursts. Gas goes up. I was still worried when I first got it because, you know, it's still right there. But by the time it comes back to you, it's dissipated, and I'm not feeling that. So right off the bat, the RDB for me has a huge advantage over any of the SBRs that I have used, strictly because with a can on, I am not crying. The next major con in regards to Bullpups is their lack of adjustability. And again, this might not be something that affects you as much. I find that they typically are a love-hate relationship. Either the dimensions work wonderfully for your body size, or you find yourself wishing you had more. Aftermarket parts for customizability are not really there. You can wind up getting different, butt plates to try and extend that area, adjust the length of pull. Something like the RDB Defender is a bit adjustable on the stock, so potentially another option there. But generally speaking, you're not going to customize this to tweak and fit your specific needs. With that being said, though, if you guys know Hop, he recently did a video on the RDB, and that man is an absolute giant and probably has like 5 feet over me in height. But he actually still was able to shoot that comfortably and fine, and it worked for him. So evidently, Bullpups, at least the RDB, is still pretty workable between shooter to shooter, irregardless of those variances in sizes. I found these really cool pictures from American Riflemen that show the dimensioning and measurements of different rifles. They had the RFB, which is essentially the RDB. It's got obviously 7.62 instead of 5.56. It's a slightly longer barrel. And of course, the biggest difference is the F or D, whether it's forward ejecting or down ejecting. But otherwise, for all intents and purposes, it's gonna show what I wanna show just fine. The biggest points that I want to call out on these drawings is regards to the measurement from butt to trigger. So on the RFB, the dimensioning here is about 14.25 inch. It's probably a little bit shorter on the RDB, but you compare that to something like the AUG, and you can see here that it has a 15-inch measurement from butt to trigger. And while that 3/4 inch might seem tiny, it's pretty significant. You want to talk about that nice little length of pull test to see where you should be adjusting. So on the RDB, you can see my hand kind of sits like here, finger there. 3/4 inch is the difference of that, which is significant. Whereas something like the BCM here, obviously I can pull this. That's absurd, right? That's not happening. Suddenly my finger is way further down. So those tiny little nuances do matter. Another thing a lot of people like to complain about on Bullpups is the usually abhorrent triggers, which is going to be a direct result of the trigger mechanism. Because the fire control group is so far rearward, the trigger is going to be connected to the fire control group, obviously with a trigger bar, which means more moving parts, more tolerancing, more potential creep, especially depending on how long that bar is. I, for one, found the RDB to have a pleasant trigger. It is loud, but it's smooth. It's not clunky, it's not hard to pull, doesn't slap or anything. So I'm not mad about it. But something like the AUG, probably gonna be a little disappointed. With the AUG, they take the progressive part of the trigger out to make it semi-auto, which makes it notoriously bad. Another area of concerns for Bullpups is the potential lack of rail space. You can see on the RDB here, I obviously got a lot of things on. They fit comfortably. For me, shouldering, I can still get a comfortable cheek weld and see down fine. But if you look at something like the AUG, there's virtually no rail space. If you get an optic on comfortably, that's probably about all you're doing. You see the BCM here, that's, I mean, pick to pick rail, that's almost more than double, which, yeah, if you like your attachments. Desert Tech has the MDRX, which from what I can see does have more rail space opportunity, but also from what I have read and can tell, that handguard doesn't exactly hold zero and might get a little bit toasty. So realistically, if you have the space and can't use it effectively, do you have the space? Again, this is something that's much more specific between individual weapons, but it is a large area of concern, erring on the side of being lackluster. Even on something like the RDB that I think has ample space, depending on you as a person, since it is such a snug fit, the adjustability on where you put these individual attachments is not there. So this might not be a comfortable spot for you to reach. This might not be a good length forward to properly see out of. I can fit with these attachments, but that doesn't mean the ones you want to use and all lasers or all optics that you prefer are going to work up here. The last major complaint I have on Bullpups is in regards to price. Honestly, I got the RDB here because I was able to get it for $700. Typically they're around $900, which is still fantastic. But you look at something like the AUG or the MDRX and you're gonna run close to 2K, if not over 2K, which is absolutely absurd. Especially when you consider the fact that you're probably gonna have to be buying other things on top of that to make them work for you. Probably gonna be buying yourself a better trigger, more rail space, different hand guards, and that adds up pretty fast. The RDB was a great pick for me. I was very curious about that as a Bullpup to begin with because of the rail space and prices. But every other Bullpup I've looked at doesn't really have that cost-benefit balance between usage and price. When you start adding up for those costs, you can get really nice and probably very customized rifles, which I honestly think would be a better usage of your money. While I think Bullpups are absolutely a fantastic potential workaround to tax stamps and forms and everything else bad about SBRs, that's not to say that they are a perfect solution. There's obviously a lot of downsides to them that might still leave you not liking Bullpups. Firearms are a very personal decision. There's a reason there are so many things on the market because different people have different preferences and priorities. And I personally still really appreciate the customizability of traditional firearms like ARs. And of course, a unique design like a Bullpup means a unique layout and operating mechanism. So that's just one extra layer of you have to get used to if you're going to go that route. Granted, I did a nice little 1R1 exercise after a couple of those. I found myself very comfortable with this whole layout. But it's still an extra thing you have to learn because it is very different than the traditional setup. And it still comes down to the principle of SBRs shouldn't be difficult to come by. People shouldn't have to struggle to find something that they can comfortably and safely use. But I will say I find myself being very pleasantly surprised by the RDB, and I'm extremely curious and excited to try out potentially other Bullpups based off of my experiences with this one. Just like everything else in the firearm world, at the end of the day, what matters is that the user is happy. So if Bullpups are for you, great. If not, so be it. But I would recommend being open to trying different things because, like I said, this was a great experience. I was not expecting to like this in the slightest, but I can see why someone else would still prefer going the SBR route, considering all of the cons that came up here. That's really all I had for you guys for this video. Hopefully it opened your eyes to possibly Bullpups. If nothing else, some insight as to why SBR restrictions might be a little unfair to certain people's body types, needs. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, leave comments and suggestions down below if there's other things you want to see on this channel, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye! Oh my goodness! Did you find a rock? Did you find a rock? Oh, good girl. Oh my goodness. Where'd it go? Where's your rock? Hey, careful. You guys get a bonus review in this video. 0 out of 10. These absolutely taste like medicine. I'm a sucker for cute packaging, and that's a cute color.